These are the parts for the field upgrade to the exhaust blower and the humidifier of the Capture BT fuming chamber. Catalog number 3170000. The items that we'll be using today are an ECM brushless DC motorized impeller. We'll be changing out the PSC impeller that's in there, a potentiometer in place of the AC chop speed control that's in there. This plate will have, we'll use this plate to mount the new speed control. We'll reuse the screws that are currently in the product. Then we'll be swapping out the humidifier. This is a sub-assembled component. There are some wires that are connected to the existing vent. There'll be a harness to rewire that as well, so that this is now a watertight connector. So that will be included. In the humidifier compartment, there's some screws in the base. We'll have some neoprene washers to remove those screws and install these washers to make sure there's no leaks into the subfloor. Up in the top of the humidifier, there is some tubing and a carbon filter we'll remove, and using this plate and this fan, this is an IP55 rated fan, we'll be reconfiguring for airflow through the humidifier. And then finally, we have 2 relays. These relays are unique. This one is a double throw single pole, so there's a common and a normally open. This one is a double pole double throw. It has a common in the middle, a normally closed and a normally open. The set is together on a side, so when we're connecting common, it'll be here. Normally open for its mate would be here. Common would be here. Normally closed for its mate. And of course, the coil to activate the relay. Since we removed the recirculation tubing to the humidifier, we'll be placing a cap over the humidity sensor housing, reusing the hose clamp that's there. And then these 2 new relays will be wired with a different harness. So that is included. So these are the tools that will be needed for the update to the fuming chamber. This is a tube of 100% silicone. This can be a hand tube like this, available from any Home Depot or Lowe's hardware store. It can also be a caulk tube style, in which case you would need a caulk gun. A number 2 Phillips screwdriver, a flat bladed screwdriver, a 3/8 nut driver, a 5/16 nut driver, any wrench, adjustable wrench preferred, and needle nose pliers. The ability to cut some fairly small tubing is important, so if your pliers do not have a cutting feature, a set of scissors or a box knife will work. The flat-bladed screwdriver is used to pry a fitting off of the old humidifier lid, so a putty knife or similar device can work instead. So we'll be working in the side compartment. It's accessed through this panel, removing these 2 screws. In addition, we'll make sure we disconnect power cord before proceeding. Once the screws are removed, the panel simply tilts towards you, and then you lift it up. Once you get into the side compartment, this is the humidifier filter and the recirculation tubing to the humidifier. We'll be removing this, be capping over the output for the humidity sensor, be changing the configuration of the humidifier with the small IP55 rated fan. We'll also be replacing this far relay and this relay here. 2 things to check to identify the generation of the product is this relay present? Most products will have this relay. If this relay is not present, then this connection right here will be together instead of broken with these two black wires. So we'll just be breaking that connection with the wires in the new harness. In addition, look at the water line running down to the humidifier. If this small water line filter is installed, it is of the latest generation. If not, it's part number 3186800. Can be supplied as needed. Simply cut the tubing and this hose barb fittings press over the two cut ends. We'll move to the humidifier next. So the next area we'll be working in is removing tubing, filter that will no longer be used, the filter retainer, some additional tubing, a fitting. This fitting will come off, and then we'll move into the humidifier. Most of the tubing have toggles that can be actuated by hand to be loosened. However, this one requires a 5/16 nut driver. These toggle clamps, or I guess technically hose clamps with a toggle, will be discarded. This filter will be discarded. I'm going to open this hose clamp a little bit. We'll put a cap onto this open end. Try to get the hose clamp as high up as you can, because as you see, the end of this, there's not a whole lot of real estate to get this guy sandwiched down. So try to get it up fairly high. Tighten down the toggle clamp, the hose clamp. Sometimes this is in your way. You can break this connection and make it behind here. Next, we'll remove this holder. 3/8 nut driver will be used to remove the 4 nuts. After the 4 nuts have been removed, this will just slide out of the way. Next, we'll be removing this tubing fitting. It's easier to open the humidifier so you can work from both sides. There's a couple of red handled toggle clamps on either side. So you're going to open each toggle clamp. This tube needs to be held up, and this wire needs to be held up. Then the humidifier will hinge open. These screws will be coming out. We will reuse the nuts that come off of these screws. Stainless steel Keps nuts, so keep those 4 nuts. Okay. This fitting is siliconed in place, so a flat blade screwdriver or putty knife is best used to pry it loose. Once you have a flat bladed screwdriver or a putty knife, it's easier to close this back so you can get under some spot where there's not as much silicone. Once you pried it loose, it should come on free. The fitting will be discarded. Any remaining silicone can be rolled off with your finger or thumb quite easily. Now we're going to install this plate supplied with the kit. There is no orientation sensitivity. It is square. And that plate is going to line up with the 4 holes that you removed the old fitting from. So we'll reuse the 4 nuts. .3/8 nut driver. Tighten each nut down. So now we'll be installing this IP rated fan. We'll use 4 screws supplied with the kit. There's an airflow direction on the side. It's molded into the black plastic, so it's often difficult to see. There's an arrow pointing to the right and then an arrow pointing down. So we want that arrow to point down so air will move into the humidifier. So verify the orientation of the fan. Thread in all 4 screws and tighten with a Phillips screwdriver. Note I've got the wires coming out the left side. That is desirable so that you can reach the wire connection in a minute. Okay, so the next step is we're going to connect this. This is a jumper to existing wiring. I'm going to find the right red and black wire to connect this to. So in order to do that, we're going to open this up. There's a black through panel connector right here. There's a ring that you have to rotate that frees the top connector. And then there is a plastic hex nut on the fitting. Remove that hex nut. This might require pliers. This humidifier will be removed in the next step, so if you need to remove it first to gain better access, that is okay. So now that the nut is removed, this fitting will come out, and the wires should have numbers on the circuits. We're looking for 54 red. There's only 1 red wire. Next, there are 2 black wires. We want 20B black. 20B black is the correct wire. So we need to trace 20B black through the zip ties. You can cut the zip ties if needed, making doubly sure that you have the correct wire. Trace it back. Again, this will be in here. So trace it back at least to this point. Grab your red and black wires. The harness will be attaching has 1 red and 1 black wire. Let's do the black wire first, because if you do not get this attached to the correct black wire, you will be connecting AC hot to this component and it will ruin it. This is DC ground. Simply set the black wire into this connector. You can see there's a metal terminal, which when we fold this half over will pinch through the insulation and make contact. So we're going to fold it over with our hand, but to actually crimp it shut, we'll use some pliers. A few presses will lock the connector in place. Repeat the procedure with the red wire, crimping the fitting with pliers. Now this panel mount connector can be put back in place. There's a flat on one side that will mate with the flat in the sheet metal. The flat is on this side. So once you get the connector through, we will replace it, the nut. The nut can be tightened further in the next step when this is removed. Now we have our connection for the new humidifier fan. Make this connection. An installation of the new fan is complete. So now that we have access to the humidifier, the next step is to remove this whole assembly. We will be removing this vent valve. There's some connections that need to be removed first, but look inside the humidifier. If it's easier, you can remove or loosen these 4 black thumb screws and look inside. The humidifier should be empty of water or have a very small amount remaining. If it is not, you can connect the power and remove water from this humidifier. Or water can be left in, just be more careful when moving the humidifier. This humidifier will be completely removed. First, wiggle the water line tubing until it is free. I like to tuck that out of the way. This connector should already be removed from the previous step, but if not, remove it now. Again, there's a locking ring that needs to be rotated about 45 degrees so that this connector can come up. You're going to look for these 2 screws. One is here, and the other is here. Remove these 2 screws. Save the screw and shoulder washer. So there will be a remaining red and black wire connected to this. Just slide the humidifier to one side so that the 3 nuts holding this valve in place can be accessed. Use a 3/8 nut driver to remove these nuts. Now the valve can come free. So once the nuts have been removed, the valve can tilt forward and be lifted out. The entire humidifier assembly can be taken to a table to be worked on, or in this case, we will be discarding the humidifier. The valve can be reused. However, a new valve is recommended, part number 3185001. To reuse this valve, the 4 wires on the solenoids need to be removed. Using pliers is the easiest way to remove these, wiggling them side to side. Another way is if you have a small gap, you can use a flat-headed screwdriver. Once the gap is big enough, and you can twist the screwdriver, working the connector free. So the existing vent valve can be reused with this harness that is included. It has a watertight fitting on one end, and then two sets of 188 spade connectors. So on this one, make sure these connectors are bent down at about a 30 to 40 degree angle. Use the single wire connectors. Orientation of the wires is not sensitive. So connect one, in this case the red wire, and then two, now the black wire, and then follow up with the second solenoid. And this valve, or a replacement, which would have the wires already installed, part number 3185001, can be reinstalled like this. At this point, before reinstalling this valve, look at this screw right here, and look at this seam right back here. We want to make sure that this is all watertight. So using some RTV silicone, run around the head of this screw and smooth it with your finger, as well as this gap right here. So we have some RTV that's a hand squeeze tube versus a larger tube that would be used with a caulk gun. Either is fine. This might have some surface rust or white CA glue residue in this area. Do your best to clean this off before applying the silicone. This screw has been changed to a stainless steel screw, but on older models may be a zinc plated screw. Again, apply a liberal amount. It can be squeegeed into the gap and smoothed out with a finger. The only two areas that are of concern is this portion here and this portion here, so that the gasket will sit smooth on a flush surface. So we need to completely flush the silicone in this area. So after smoothing over the RTV in these two areas that will coincide with the gasket on the humidifier cover, let the RTV cure and skim over for approximately 30 minutes. You can work in other areas while this is going on. One thing we can do is we can tighten this nut that was removed to identify the correct black wire for the new humidifier fan earlier. Needle nose pliers work well for this. Getting this nut tight is important so that this bottom of the humidifier chamber cannot leak any condensate water into the drawer below. If you like, at this time, a small amount of RTV can be placed in this area. This water line is a tight fit coming through here, but should that be a concern, a small amount of RTV can be placed in there as well. And again, smooth with the finger. This is an attempt to make sure that this is watertight. In addition, we will be removing these 4 screws. If they are difficult to remove, do not strip them. Use a screwdriver versus a power tool. This will help ensure that the screws are not stripped out. We'll remove each screw one at a time, and in the kit are 4 black neoprene washers. We will replace each screw after installing the washer over the screw. again, to make sure this plane is watertight. So after all 4 screws have been removed and the neoprene washers installed, make sure the screws are tightened back down, although don't go too crazy because this neoprene washer won't let the screw go all the way back down. At this time, smooth over any RTV that has been applied to the panel floor connector and the water line tube. Being cognizant of this gasket, which will lay in approximately this area, smooth off any excess RTV. So after applying some RTV on this screw, the seam, as well as installing these 4 black neoprene washers and adding any RTV silicone as desired on these 2 floor penetrations, we can install or reinstall the vent valve, reusing the 3 nylock nuts removed earlier. Sometimes this one is hard to thread on by hand, so set the nut inside your 3/8 nut driver to get a better grip. And then tighten down each nut. They need to be firmly snugged, but not overly firm. You don't want to strip the threads or pull the clinch studs out of this wall, because that would be something difficult to overcome in the field. Make sure the valve actuates. As far as parts removal goes, we're going to start at the top and work our way down. The first item will be replacing the exhaust blower for this blower. The holes that mount the product are the same position, same thread. There's a brown and a blue wire. You need to disconnect those. Typically, they can just be wiggled and pulled. If it's a little difficult, use needle nose pliers to get a better grip, and you want to wiggle them side to side as you gently pull. Do not pull on the wire. And remove all 4 screws with lock washers to remove the exhaust blower. The blower will go in the same location. Set it so that the wire comes towards you. Replace all 4 screws with lock washers. Once all 4 screws are in, I'm going to snug each one. Make sure we compress that lock washer on all 4. The mate to this is not installed yet. It's on our new harness. So we'll tuck that out of the way for the time being. The next area is in the speed control removal. So we're going to change the speed control here to a potentiometer. This lock washer and nut are supplied on the threaded stem of the new potentiometer. Go ahead and remove that lock washer and nut, install it onto the plate, and tighten the nut. When working in this area, if necessary, you can remove the gray ribbon cable. Find the 2 screws on the front and back side of the speed control and remove those. There's 3 wires coming from the speed control, 2 red and a green. So those 3 wires need to be disconnected. And the speed control is out. Install the new speed control. replace the 2 screws that were removed earlier. So after disconnecting the speed control, the red and brown wire may have AC voltage to it when returned to service. As a precautionary measure, tape over the open connector, even though they are recessed, just to make sure there's no chance of a ground out situation or a short. So the next area we're working in is the rewiring and replacement of relays in this area. First step is there are 2 wires, a red and a black wire. It's 91 red and 92 black that are connected to the 2 lugs respectively of the power supply. We will be removing those, and on the new wire harness 319-7600 we'll be replacing those red and black wires with these 2 wires. The wiring has a printing with the circuit number, although it's sometimes difficult to see. You can move these wires over a little bit as needed. Identify 91 red, which is right here, and the lug has a Phillips head terminal. So once that is loosened, sometimes the wire with the fork terminal likes to stick, so it's often easier to remove both terminals, even though we're keeping one of the terminals. We'll pull the old terminal out of the way, bring in our new harness, secure the red wire, reattach the red wire that is staying, and retighten the terminal lug. Move the old wires. One note when installing these 2 fork terminals, the terminal tends to come off one end or one side, so it's not right in the middle, it's on one end or one side of it. When installing the new terminals, if you install them with the same orientation, it tends to want to bend the terminal and make it more difficult to slide on. If you rotate them so they are back to back, it is easier and presents a thinner profile to get the wire in place. So after the red and black wire fork terminals are secured to the power supply, we're going to take this new harness, bundle it up like this, pass it back here. Once you get the wires back here, you can undo the wiring harness and find the 4-pin Molex MiniFit 3.0 terminal and the Molex MiniFit. It's a 2-pin white translucent terminal. We're going to connect the new exhaust blower to the black terminal. And then we're going to connect the connector from the new speed control to the white 2-pin connector. All right. We're going to move the bundle of wires down. and into this area for the next step. So the next area we'll be working in is this underneath side of this panel, which has all of the control relays. There's actually a transformer in the back and another relay in the back. We'll be disconnecting wires from the transformer, and the transformer will no longer be used. We will be making one wire change to this relay, although this relay will stay here. So the first step is we're going to replace this relay with the double pole single throw relay supplied in the kit. Notice the top terminals are missing. This is the relay that will be replacing this end relay. So we use a 5/16 nut driver. The front nut can be loosened but not removed. Once loosened, these Kep's nuts will thread off by hand. The back nut will be completely removed. Now this relay is out where you can work on it. When removing these connectors, it's very handy to use a set of needle nose pliers. I recommend working one circuit at a time and connecting to the new wire harness. Rotating the connector while pulling up, sometimes using your hand as a pivot point, is the best way to remove these. Remove the two connectors on the coil first.
Red and brown.
These two wires, this is a good example of how pulling on a wire can create a problem. So you see the plastic cover came off. If we'd pulled on the wire, it probably would have broken that connection. So now you can pull on the metal
Terminal.
removing the connector, and then just slide that cover back down over it. So I've got my 32 DE. So now we've got to find the mate for these two wires on the new harness. So when you're looking at the new harness, you're looking for an orange and a brown wire set right here. If you look at the ends, two have a female receptacle connection and two have a male tab. Locate the two with a male tab, and the brown wire will go to the brown wire just removed from the relay coil. You can kind of push it in till you feel a snap. The orange wire will go to the red wire, 32DE, just removed from the coil. Next, we'll remove the AC wires. This black wire is common, and this red-orange wire is normally open. So now this relay is free and can be discarded. Looking at our new relay, the brown and orange wires are the coil wires. There's no sensitivity on which terminal of the coil these go to, so press one on one terminal, press the other on the other terminal. Now you have two more wires, red wires, on the new harness, and you have the red and black wires removed from the old harness. Removed from the old relay on the old harness. So we're going to connect to the common on one side, the black wire that was previously removed. and on its mate to the normally open position, the double red wire. It's actually red-orange. And then from the new harness, this wire says 95A, and this wire says 91C. So 91C will go to the common. And now there's only one option left, 95B will go to the normally open. This relay has been connected, and now we can put it back. If you try to put it back straight, you'll see it doesn't want to go because the old relay was shorter than the new relay. So we're going to connect this guy, but we're going to put him at an angle. So he's going to sit at an angle like that. There's one nut that will be securing him on the front. And this relay is done. So now we'll remove this relay. You can also see in this area, there's two black wires coming from the relay going to the black wire from the water pump, and there's a blue 49AB blue wire. I'm going to go ahead and break those connections. As soon as we remove this relay, this wire harness, this old wire harness, will be free. Older models, you may find that these two are connected, so simply break that connection at this time. So here's our old harness. All that's left is connected to this relay we'll be replacing. Some models, especially ones that don't have this, there will be no lower screw here. There'll only be a screw and nut supporting this water pump. That's not a problem, but in this version, we do have the lower screw. So we'll remove the lower screw. Once that top screw is loosened, this will just fall out. There's no need to keep this screw and nut. So now we can move the connections from the old relay over to our new relay. This is the double pole, double throw. So there are coil studs. There's a set of common, normally closed and normally open, which you can see by a diagram here, and then a second set, common, normally closed, normally open. So take a break. Now that the old relay is out, the harness that was connected to it will no longer be used. We have the remaining connections from the new wire harness we just installed. This bundle of wires will all be connected to this relay. This will be the new relay we use in place of the old one. To make life a little easier, there'll be one gray connection that we'll be making to a relay in the very back. So we'll hold off on him for now, but there's two remaining black wires. Let's go ahead and make that connection now. The two terminals are different. There's one male, one female, so you cannot get it wrong. But just for reference, we've got 93 black, which will be connecting to the black wire to the water pump. And then this wire, I believe it's 90 black, will connect to 49AB blue. So all we're left with are a series of connections to make to our new relay. So we're going to identify the coil wires first. That will be placed here. 90 black and 91B red. So there's only one red wire, 91B. So 90 black is what is connected to 49AB blue. So if you trace that wire back, this is him right here. So 90 black will go to the other terminal of the relay coil. So now we're going to populate this side of the relay. This is common, and we're going to look for 92B black. So 92B will come through and connect into the common terminal. 93 black, which is this wire, will come through and be to our normally open position. So now we have the coil, which in summary is 90 black, 91B red. We have one side of the double pole relay. We have our common, which is the center. That should be 92B black. And we have the normally open mate to that common, which is 93 black. Now we have a gray wire remaining. This will go to the common on the other set of relay contacts. So bring him through, place it on the common. There's one connection left to make here, which we will be making to the normally closed. That is the upper spade terminal. We have the other end of our gray wire, which is 99 gray. And then we have a relay at the very back. So this relay, it's hard to see, but the larger wires coming off of here, these black wires, this is 4E, which goes to the common position. This is 6AB black. So one wire says 6A and one wire says 6B. This is the wire we're going to remove. It's the double black wire going to the normally open position of this rear relay. So we're going to bring him through, and we will populate him onto the normally closed contact. Now this relay is completely done. The remaining connection we have to make is this 99 gray, which will go in the exact location where 6AB black was removed. So now we have to make that remaining connection to the open terminal on this far back relay. It's kind of hard to see sometimes which way it goes. The terminal has a flat end and a rounded end. The flat end will go this to this side. So now we're going to remove the wires on this transformer. If they're difficult, again, use a pair of needle nose pliers and work each connection off. The lower two terminals on the outside will have smaller diameter orange wires. The top will have 4 larger diameter wires, 2 black and 2 white. As you remove these wires, just bring them down. We have 2 black wires, 2 white wires, and 2 smaller orange wires. We will go ahead and put electrical tape over the 2 black wires, just for safety. So now we've taped over the terminals of the 2 black wires. If this is a 230 volt unit, you would also electrical tape over the 2 white wires. Once this is complete, these wires can be tucked away and the new relay can be secured back in the spot where the original relay was removed from. Again, we'll only have one screw to mount it with because the new relay is longer. The new exhaust blower has been installed. The new speed control has been installed. The new wire harness, along with the two new relays that swapped out old relays, have been installed. All wiring connections have been made. All wiring disconnections have been made. Now the new humidifier can be installed. We'll set it here for just a second. You'll notice a couple of changes. One is the float switch is stainless steel, and there's only one float switch instead of two. You'll also notice some less wiring in this area as well as underneath because the nebulizer board that was previously in the bottom is no longer there. You'll also notice this mating watertight connector, which will mate with the connector at the end of the wire harness on our vent valve. So this connector should be made last because it is easier to access this screw without the connector in place. This watertight connector should be passed underneath. When you set the humidifier in place, before screwing it in, this connection can be made. There is an orange gasket that needs to be compressed, so insert the male end until you hear a click. Now we can reuse our shoulder washer and screw from earlier. There is a hole here that needs to be lined up, so it's often easier to get the screw in first and then find its home, because the humidifier does not sit flat. This is actually elevated. So once you find its home, you can get the screw started a few turns, leaving it loose until you get the other side attached. So after both screws and shoulder washers have been reinstalled, these screws can be tightened. Again, snug it by hand, don't overdo it. The humidifier is installed. We can make the connection on the floor. Note this locating. There's a divot right here. That will align with a small protrusion that is in this end. It's at the 12 o'clock position of this connector. Once you've got it in, you can press it down. Sometimes this rotating lock needs to be rotated slightly to get it to engage all the way. Once you've got it engaged all the way, then this locking ring will rotate and then slide down, and then one final rotation of about 45 to 60 degrees will lock it in. We're going to bring back our tubing. Look at the end. If it's been deformed open or is crusty or brittle, you can cut this off to get to a new section of silicone tubing, and then press it over the hose barb fitting on the lid, and then go ahead and make sure this is all the way down. Applying a little pressure, you can tighten and snug each of the 4 black thumb screws. Any excess wires can be pushed in for their final home. Checking to make sure all connections are made, all parts are back into place. This cover can then be closed. Just watch this red and white wire. You have to lift it up to allow the cover to close. Before you latch it, you can reach your fingers under these 2 sides, this side and the other side. Just make sure there's no wires in the way and push them in slightly if there are. And then toggle clamps will be resecured, and this portion is finished. After removing the wires from the old exhaust blower, this brown and white wire may have AC power. Even though the connectors are recessed, we'll go ahead and use some electrical tape to prevent any accidental grounding or short. If the model is a 230 volt model, the white wire may have AC power as well. So again, using electrical tape, we will protect those from accidental short or grounding. So all parts have been replaced, new parts installed. Let's do a couple last things. One is this potentiometer. To place it in the correct setting, you should turn it counterclockwise until it stops. That correlates to the maximum speed for this blower. Next, reconnect any wires that were disconnected. This ribbon cable was disconnected. There is a tab here which aligns with a slot in the front of the PC board connector. So make sure those two are aligned. So after the work is complete, make sure to fill the water bottle with distilled or RO filtered water. Replace the tube through the hole of the cap. Make sure it goes to the bottom of the bottle. Set it back in its cradle. Once plugged into appropriately rated power source, turn the power switch on. The water bottle should be seen with the water level reducing as water is pumped into the humidifier. While this is occurring, we can walk through the diagnostics to make sure everything is functioning properly. Go through the settings menu. The diagnostic is the second option from the bottom. We'll go ahead and cycle each component. If you leave the door closed, it will turn on each component for 30 seconds. If you want to run the component for longer than 30 seconds, open the main door. We'll start with the recirc blower. Press the right arrow. The test will change from no to yes. The recirc blower can be heard running at two different speeds, a slower speed and a faster speed. If you hear both speeds, then that component is working correctly. You can stop the test by pressing the left arrow or simply proceed to the next test. The purge blower is next. We're going to start the test by pressing the right arrow. If you still have the side panel off, you can walk to the side or look around to the side. The new recirc blower, the new exhaust blower should be heard running. If you wait approximately 1 minute, we'll check the vent as well. So while the purge blower is running, the other item to check that should be opening is this vent valve. You can feel at the bottom, you should be able to get your finger through between the flap and the gasket. After approximately 1 minute, this valve should be open. If that's the case, the purge valve is working correctly. The next item to test is the humidify function. We're going to skip that for just a second. The next item that can be tested is the hot plate. Since no work was done in this area, it is unlikely that there is an issue here, but to verify, press the right arrow, and then either using a thermocouple or using extreme care, the hot plate can be verified to be working. In order to not touch the hot plate, wait approximately 1 to 2 minutes and place some small drops of water on the hot plate. That will show if the hot plate is heating up. After testing the hot plate, we'll check the door locks. Again, no work was done in this area. When initiated, you should see the door latch pop out. When turned off, the door latch should retract. The next test is of the humidify valve. We'll go ahead and start that. You should hear the valve actuate. That would be the valve that we replaced behind these two slots. You should also feel some air coming out of there. That would indicate that the new IP55 rated blower is installed and wired correctly. Finally, after the humidify valve, you can test the cabinet light. Turning the light from yes to no will dim the light when yes and full power when no. We'll go back up to the humidify. When this is initiated, we will hear the valve open again. We will feel air coming out of this slot, but we will also hear the recirculation blower, which is in this box, turn on. That is working correctly. Stop the test. So after running the diagnostic test, there's one final step. This is a change to a setting in the software. Using the back button, return to the main menu, go to the service menu, press OK, enter the password, up, down, left, right, OK. Go to the blower speed at the very bottom, press OK, enter the admin password, up, right, down, start, OK. The humidify speed will be blinking. Currently it is 40. Turn that using the left arrow down to 20. Press OK. The final step that can be run is a recalibration of the humidity sensor. If desired, those instructions are located in the manual. Finally, check for any loose wires or any tools or parts left behind. Once satisfied, replace the right side panel. The two pins at the bottom will insert into the holes. The panel will slide into place. The two screws removed earlier will be replaced and tightened hand tight with a screwdriver.